Yeah, right. So, a very good morning to our viewers joining us for this Facebook Live interaction from US, and a very good evening to our friends from India. Namaste, my name is Tushar, and I'm currently working in 5G communication system research and development in one of the leading semiconductor companies in US. And today we have with us one of the most educated, a person who inspire a lot of young people, Shri Jayant Sinha ji. Jayant Sinha ji, welcome to this Facebook Live discussion. Thank you so much for giving us time, and it's amazing the way you have reached so many young audience. And I would like to mention to our viewers today that I contacted Jayantji's office through WhatsApp button, which he has on his Facebook page, and his office gave me the email address, and sir replied to our proposal, and so I'm so glad that we have this kind of accessibility, and member of parliaments like you are using technology for reaching out with so many young people. So thank you so much, sir, for doing all this. So we have our esteemed guest is a very well established professional. So before we start, I would like to take some time and brief our viewers about his biography and what he has been doing so far in his tenure. So Jayant Sinha ji is a second-term member of parliament from Jharkhand, India, and he's currently the chairperson of the Standing Committee for Finance and leads the parliamentary panel that has oversight of the Ministries of Finance, Corporate Affairs, Statistics, and Program Implementation, as well as the Niti Aayog, which is the government planning agency. Previously, Mr. Sinha served on India's Council of Ministers from 2014 to 2019, first as a Minister of State for Finance and then as a Minister for State for Civil Aviation. Mr. Sinha gained wide recognition as an innovative and result oriented policymaker with singular success ranging from piloting the legislation that brought in India's game changing bankruptcy code to establishing India's sovereign wealth fund. He launched the Udayan Regional Connectivity Scheme, which expanded number of operational airports in India by 50% in just 3 years. Professionally, Mr. Sinha was partner at Omidyar Network and the managing director of the Network India Advisors, where he led overall investment strategy and operation in India from 2009 to 2013. Mr. Sinha has an MBA with distinction from the Harvard Business School, an MS in Energy Management and Policy from University of Pennsylvania, and a Bachelor of Technology with distinction from IIT Delhi. He has been awarded Distinguished Alumnus Award from IIT Delhi in 2015. So, I mean, Jenji, you have all the feathers on your cap. So, with that, today's topic is very interesting because we have been hearing a lot of commentaries within India as well as internationally. So, with that, I would like you to address us today on the topic of economic opportunities for India in the Corona world today. So you will be speaking for 15-20 minutes, and then we will take question and answers. And over to you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Tushar, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you. I presume many of you are in the US and outside of India, and there is, of course, a substantial group that's here in India also. So very good to be with all of you in the morning or the evening, depending on which time zone you're in. Now, when Tushar reached out to me and asked me to speak on economic issues, I suggested to him that it might be interesting to think about how this particular shock that the global economy is now going through is going to create opportunities for India and make India even more successful in economic position. I suggested to him that it might be interesting to think about how this. I would request all of you to put your your systems on mute, because otherwise we might have feedback and background noise. So I just heard some feedback. So if you could just put it on mute, it'll be good for everyone. So as I was saying earlier, my thought was that it might be interesting for you all to see why it is that this particular shock, this very unprecedented situation that we are in right now, can actually be a net positive for India over the next few years, in the longer term, that is. So I thought that might be interesting, and I will go into that in some detail. But I'll spend about 15, 20 minutes in my opening remarks, and then I think it will be much more interesting for you all to engage in a Q&A, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. But let's first try and put it in the context of some of the other big economic crises, economic circumstances that we have dealt with in the past. Now, you all are much younger. You all are just getting started in your careers in most cases. But I am 57 years old now, and being 57, I've had the experience of going through multiple crises, multiple shocks. Going back to 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, communism ended, globalization really took off, and everybody started to believe that free market systems were the way to go. That was back in 1989. I had just graduated from IIT in 1985, and I was in the US then. This was the Ronald Reagan era, but we could see that shock, the falling of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of communism, was really going to resort the economic order, and it absolutely did. So that was one very important set of events that we lived through. Then the next big economic event that happened was the Asian financial crisis, which was in 98, 99, 2000. That also had a huge impact on countries like Korea, countries like Thailand and Indonesia, and of course had an impact on India as well. So that also made a big difference to the relative economic position of multiple countries, particularly in the ASEAN zone. This was then followed by 9/11 and the dot-com bust that kind of all happened about the same time in 2000, 2001, just a few years later. And that also had a tremendous impact on the global economy. Then, of course, as you all well remember, we had the global financial crisis, which was in 2008, 2009, which also then resulted in many countries, particularly countries like Portugal, Greece, Spain, Ireland, the famous pigs as they were called, finding it very difficult to restart growth, finding it very difficult to get going. So each of these shocks, each of these economic crises resulted in change in the relative position of different countries. And this is in my living memory, but we can go back to the Great Depression of 1929 till 1933-34. We can go back to the Spanish flu of 1918-19. Each of these exogenous events, each of these big shocks to the global economy had a huge impact on the relative position of different countries. And now what we're dealing with the coronavirus pandemic is going to have a similar impact, if not an even larger impact, compared to these events of the past, these mega black swan events, if you will. Now, let's start to compare the coronavirus pandemic to the global financial crisis, because I'm sure you all have experienced that first. When the global financial crisis happened in 2008, 2009, it did not impact India as much. Certainly, it really had a huge impact on the US and in European countries. It really meant tremendous devastation for many companies in the financial services sector, but it was somewhat restricted. It was a North Atlantic crisis, not so much even a global crisis, and it was largely in the financial sector. Nonetheless, despite it being restricted in that regard, it had a huge impact. And we went through a real slowdown in global economic growth for at least 3 or 4 years thereafter. Now, if you look at the coronavirus pandemic and compare it to the global financial crisis, you'll note that it's not restricted to just Europe and the US. The coronavirus pandemic has affected virtually every country. And if some countries are not in the midst of a full-blown pandemic, they soon will be. It's just a matter of the virus, continuing to grow exponentially, and obviously people being infected and going to hospitals and so on. So it's going to affect everybody. That's one. Two, it's affecting every sector. So whether it's demand for those goods and services that are associated in some way with social distancing or not, or whether it's supply because factories have shut down and planes are not flying and trains are not running, whether it's the demand side or the supply side, it's affecting virtually all sectors of the economy. So when we compare it to the global financial crisis, which you all know was quite a major event for the global economy, you'll realize that this is an economic event that's actually 2 or 3 times more profound than the global financial crisis, and therefore it is going to profoundly resort the global economic order. Now, once I explain that, everybody asks me, so how long is this pandemic going to last? You're saying it's a bigger financial crisis. The global financial crisis lasted a year and a half, 2 years, and then it was a recovery phase after that. How long is the pandemic going to last? And for that, because we are all scientists, we are all interested in science and engineering, I point you all to medical science and what's happening there. And there are three very important triggers that you need to think about. The first trigger you need to think about is testing. When are we going to be able to test people for their corona status efficiently and quickly? How long is the science going to take? How long is the technology going to take? So that we can give you an answer cheaply for a few dollars or a few hundred rupees and quickly in 10 or 15 minutes. So we need to be able to understand how quickly this is going to happen. So that's one very important aspect of this. The second important aspect of this is we need to also understand when a cure is going to be available. Now, as you know, there are many drugs that are currently in clinical trials, human trials right now. There's a lot of potential from remdesivir, favipiravir. People have also felt that HCQ could work, which is the hydroxychloroquine and erythromycin combination. So there are a variety of different drugs that are in clinical trials right now, in gold standard, double-blind, randomized, control trials, so that we can figure out which drug is actually going to cut hospitalization rate and cut mortality rates. But when we look at the testing side, as far as testing is concerned, the science has advanced sufficiently that we could be quite confident that within a few weeks, if not already, we've solved the testing problem. You must be familiar with Abbott's ID9 test. You must be familiar with the RT-PCR tests that are being done right now. You must be familiar with some of the work that's being done in serological studies. So given all of the developments on the testing side, we can be relatively confident that the testing problem. But when it comes to the pharmaceutical interventions, the drugs, right now the best estimate is that before we can have a drug that's safe and we know is going to dramatically reduce hospitalization rates and mortality, we are at least 6 months away. Now, this is important when you think about it from an economic point of view. Once testing is there, quite a bit of economic activity becomes possible because we can do the tracing and the isolation relatively efficiently. So then we can get our containment zones pretty well tightly focused. We can lock things down very efficiently, and we can start to open up the economy. And so, maybe 50, 60, 70% of the economy can work. When the drugs start to work well, then we can be quite comfortable that 80, 90% of economic activity can be resumed because we will be in a situation where we can manage the disease. It will be unpleasant. It will be something that we don't want to get, but at least it's not going to be a disease that's going to mean very high mortality rates. So the drugs are going to make a very big difference in being able to resume economic activity. Hopefully, if we have drugs within 6 months, we'll be able to resume economic activity at 80, 90% of what the old normal was. Now, friends, the question becomes, when are we going to get back to 100% of the economic activity? That's only going to happen when we have a vaccine that has been scaled up and has inoculated at least 55% of the population. And that means 55% of 7 billion people. So 3 billion people or so, 3.5 billion people are going to have to get inoculated. So billions of dosages going to have to be produced. And that whole process of being able to go through the human trials, make sure the vaccine is safe, make sure that we've got the production capacity to make billions of doses, get the billions of doses out to people, inoculate them at scale. That whole process is going to take, best estimates are somewhere between 18 to 24 months. This is what the experts are telling us right now. So if you look at the timeline of the coronavirus pandemic, friends, this is something we are going to have to deal with over the next 18 to 24 months. This is what the medical science is telling us. This is what the experts are telling us, and I'm sure you're reading all the literature as well, and you know this is kind of the state of play, if you will, on the medical side. So now we turn to the economic aspect of this. We are going to have to manage the coronavirus pandemic globally. I'm not just saying India, globally for the next 18 to 24 months, and we're going to have to operate in a new normal. And as we all to change in many ways the economic structure or the way in which we have conducted our lives. So that's kind of the backdrop of what we have to deal with when it comes to the pandemic itself. Now, how are people going to be impacted in terms of the economy? Well, the way we are dealing with it here in India, the way we are thinking about it in India, is that we have to address the vulnerable sections of the population first. And this, of course, means people in rural areas that need support, people in urban areas that need support. You've seen all the visuals of people who are workers in the informal area trying to get back home. So we've got to provide support to migrant workers. We have to work with them. We have to provide support for micro enterprises, MSMEs. We have to provide support for the financial sector, and we have to provide support for those companies that are in the sectors that have been impacted the most, like in travel and tourism, hospitality, exports, automotive. These are the areas, these are the sectors that are hurting the most from this coronavirus pandemic. So the principles that we have followed are: number one, focus on the vulnerable sections of society, the vulnerable aspects of the economy first. Number two, work very closely with the states so that we have a coordinated outreach, a coordinated program between the center and the states. Number three, take an integrated, comprehensive approach, deal with the health side, the economic side at the same time. Make sure all of India is getting involved in all of this. And number four, do this in a calibrated, sequenced manner. Because we all know, as I said, this is going to take 18 to 24 months. We need to be thoughtful about when and how we fire our bullets. We've got to make sure we still have some resources, some ability to be able to deal with this pandemic over time as well. So, as I said, the four principles we're following are: provide full support to vulnerable sections of society. Number two, follow cooperative federalism, work with the states, make sure they are equipped and trained to do this. Do it in an integrated, comprehensive way. Look at the health side, look at the economic side, make sure all aspects of government, all aspects of civil society are involved. And number four, do it in a calibrated, sequence manner. These are the principles that we are following, and you'll see that the policy actions we've taken are ones that are really following these different principles. Now, with the pandemic lasting 18 to 24 months, with us on the economic side, following these principles, providing support where required, let me now come to the last part of my opening remarks, and then I will be happy to take questions. Why is this an opportunity for India? Why is it that as the relative order, the relative competitive strength of different nations changes, that India becomes very advantaged? India has a golden opportunity to get out ahead of others. And there are four reasons, friends, for that. Number one, please understand that we managed the pandemic brilliantly well. The Honorable Prime Minister took very decisive and courageous decisions early on in the process. We established a very tight lockdown when we had very few cases, much earlier than most other countries. And as a result of that, the disease burden we are dealing with, particularly because we have a young population, is actually far lower than that of other comparable countries. So we have managed the pandemic very well, we've managed the disease burden very well, and so we are already in an advantaged situation. So that's one very important factor. Second important factor, the issues that matter fiscally, fiscal deficit, inflation, current account surplus, these macro parameters that typically are the ones that constrain us are right now not a constraint. Oil prices have come down dramatically. Our current account is in surplus. The rupee continues to be very strong relative to other emerging market currencies. And we have an opportunity to be able to provide resources in the right places, the fiscal deficit is not as important now as it used to be. So we have an opportunity fiscally to be able to do much more than we would have been able to do. And that's the second factor. The third factor is that countries all over the world, are asking themselves how do they build more resilient supply chains? How do they diversify away from just being in one country? And they are looking to India, they're very excited about India and saying, how do we bring more manufacturing, more production, more services to India and make India a very important part of our global supply chain? So that shifting of supply chains, more resilient, more robust supply chains is benefiting India. The fourth factor that is making it really, really possible for India to rocket ahead is the inspiring leadership and the extraordinary credibility that the Honorable Prime Minister enjoys right now. We have, people fully in support of what the government is doing, what the Honorable Prime Minister is saying. His ratings are the highest in the world, as they have been consistently. And so people are willing to really support the government's agenda, support what the Honorable Prime Minister asks them to do. And that enables us to really start to put in place some very game-changing ideas, game-changing reforms, so that India can really get out ahead relatively from other countries. So I'll conclude here by saying that, like a lot of other economic shocks that we have seen, the coronavirus pandemic is going to change the world economic order, change the world order. And this is a great opportunity for India, number one. Second part that I said was to say that India is handling this extremely well. We are following 3 or 4 principles that have enabled us to really get ahead of the curve with respect to the pandemic itself. And then number 3, the final part of my opening remarks was to say that because of these factors, India is very, very well positioned right now. We have a golden opportunity to build the new India of our dreams. I'm sure you all will support us in that and work with us on that, wherever you may be. We look forward to getting your collaboration and your assistance in this. And again, we have, as I said, an extraordinary opportunity to build the India of our dreams. Thank you very, very much. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Jayant Sinha, for an amazing, a very clear message which you have given us through your address. My question, maybe I can start with a question, because then I won't get chance, because there are people are really they are looking forward to it. So when we see these images of migrant laborers on social media or in the news, those are kind of heart wrenching, and it's it's yet until now it's not very clear that how successful we have been successful in dealing with the overall migrant crisis which we are going through, especially in states like Delhi, states like Maharashtra. So where do we stand on migrant issue? And because you are from the rural belt of India, what is the situation there? Because we do had transfer some money through the ongoing programs, but how do we increase our reach to the people whom we haven't have any sort of connection so far? So there's no clarity on it. So please.
No, so our brothers and sisters who are working in various large cities and who have been extremely patient and have shown great strength and fortitude to deal with the long lockdown, now very understandably so want to go back home. In my own constituency in Hazaribagh and Ramgarh, there are 2 districts. I put out a form, a Google form online, to have people fill out where they are and when they want to come back. Friends, you'll be amazed to see that in 2 days, I have had about 50,000 people from Hazaribagh and Ramgarh alone, just 2 districts in Jharkhand. Jharkhand is 24 districts. So just in 2 districts, 50,000 people have written to me and said, Janji, we'd like to come back home. Now, this is being played out all across India, and it is absolutely right that we provide them all the support and all the help that we can to enable them to go to wherever they want to go. Now, the challenge, Tushar, is that while the government can certainly provide them resources where they are. So, for example, if you're in Bengaluru, we'll provide you resources, food in Bengaluru, we'll provide you support in Bengaluru. But when you have to go from Bengaluru to Jharkhand, the Jharkhand government has to be ready to accept them. The Shramik specials are ready, we can have the trains, but the Jharkhand government has to have the ability to absorb these numbers and be able to keep them safely in quarantine, look after them well over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then be able to do the necessary isolation and tracing if indeed they're coronavirus positive. So the receiving states have to play a very important role in being able to handle our brothers and sisters who want to go back. Sadly, it's a JMM government. Shri Hemant Sorenji is the chief minister. We have not got the support that we need to be able to send our brothers and sisters back home. And of course, I'm trying my best as the MP from Hazaribagh to do that. But we are not succeeding every day. I am writing to the chief minister, but I'm not getting any response. मैंने उसका एक हैशटैग भी निकाला है, हेमंत रहम करो इनको आने दो वापस. And the good news is that if you look at the BJP ruled states, whether it is Uttar Pradesh, whether it's Madhya Pradesh, or some of the other BJP states, you'll find the other BJP states have done an exemplary job, have done a wonderful job of getting people back from Kota, from the major cities, and sending them back home. So the states have a very important role to play, Tushar, in being able to prepare for our brothers and sisters to come back home and be able to deal with the migrant labor problem that we have right now. So this is a two-way street, and we have to manage it that way. Just so this is where the center and all the states have to work together in harmony to be able to provide support to our brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Jayanji. So moving next, we have a question from Parth. Parth, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thanks, Tushar, and namaste, Jayantji. My question comes from what you said about providing...
You can introduce yourself also.
Oh, sorry. My name is Parth Parihar. I'm a PhD student in economics from Princeton University. Namaste, Jayantji. My question to you comes from what you said about providing support to critical sectors of the economy and the fact that the fiscal deficit is not as much of a concern right now. There has been a recent debate about financing a cash stimulus to both workers and firms, with the costs financed by the RBI. Proponents like former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan argue that it will help stabilize the lives of the working poor while not causing inflationary pressures as demand is lagging far behind during this crisis. As a former Minister of State for Finance, where do you fall in this debate? What should the government do?
Well, Parth, as far as the stimulus is concerned and as the necessary support is concerned for vulnerable sections, I have already mentioned that is the highest priority for the government. And the RBI and the government working together have already provided support where it's urgently required. You know that we have doubled rations. We are providing food right now to anybody who needs it. You know that we have sent already the first installment of the Kisan Samman Nidhi. We have transferred already about 1,000 rupees per Jan Dhan account for our ladies, and we will continue to do that for another month at least. And so wherever there is a requirement for providing urgent support, we are doing so. And of course, as has been said, we will continue to do so. So please be assured that whatever is required for vulnerable sections, the government is committed to providing that support.
Shri Sagar.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Good evening, sir. So as you mentioned that the companies are looking forward to diversify their supply chains and all. So what kind of changes can we expect in the bureaucracy, like so that the government can be proactive and can pursue the investments? So as you have been both in private sectors and very actively working with the government, so what kind of changes can you see, or can you see coming forward to
So
handle this?
those changes are already happening. You may have read that 1,000 companies are being targeted. There are already discussions going on with 1,000 companies. In addition to that, there are very significant labor reforms that have already been undertaken in some states. Land pooling is being considered so that we can provide land to companies that want to get established in India. And then, of course, ease of doing business has been a consistent priority for our government since we took office in 2014, which is why we've gone from 142nd in a. So we will continue to streamline, we will continue to provide all the necessary support to businesses, large and small, as we go forward. But with respect to getting supply chains to look at India as a favored destination, that work is already underway in a very, very significant manner.
Next question is from Gurdit Singh Vora. Please go ahead.
Hello, good evening, sir. I'm Gurdit Singh Vora from IIT Mumbai. And my question is, considering the Western economies, especially USA, are now planning to move out of China. So how do you think India can grab this opportunity? And any new changes you feel to be brought in on the front of ease of doing business in India?
So, Gurdit, I just really answered that question. The previous question was exactly the same. And I would request all of you not to repeat the question, because then, we are taking away from other good questions that might be asked. But I just said, the government's already working with, 1,000 companies, in discussions with them. There's work happening on all kinds of different policies, labor, land. Certainly, we are rolling out the red carpet for companies that want to invest in India in many different states. And ease of doing business has been just a consistent priority area for our government, and we will continue to focus on streamlining business regulations, red tape, unnecessary policies, and so on.
Shoaini?
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good evening, sir. I'm Shaun. I just graduated with a master's from the University of Cambridge, UK. So my question to you is that in this post-corona world, where very powerful countries like the US are implementing these temporary lockdowns or the bans on immigration workers, so for example, even very highly skilled workers working in academia or industry, do you think we could have some economic plan set up to attract this very talented diaspora back to the nation?
No, I think, Shravani, that's a very good point. And of course, India benefits greatly from its outstanding diaspora. I was a diaspora member myself for many years when I lived in the US for 20 plus years. So I relate very much to the diaspora concerns and the diaspora issues. And of course, I know how capable and talented our diaspora is. Many of them already, as you know, through Operation Vande Bharat, are coming back to India, and they will immeasurably strengthen India as they did post the global financial crisis as well. Now, there are many programs within the government of India to provide support for diaspora participants. There are various research programs that are available. There are many support systems that are available through Startup India and Mudra and so on. So I would very much encourage our diaspora to come back, take advantage of all the different programs that the government has already created, and really give India your talents and energies, because we absolutely need it.
Great. Yeah. We all are looking for opportunities in India. So I'm also, because first time in life we are feeling that insecurity, which is very hard to explain, being away from home. So I agree with you. Next question, Simon. Simon, are you
Yeah.
ready?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, good evening, sir. My name is Jayant Sahu, and I'm a PhD student in atmospheric science at the University of Maryland. Firstly, I would like to thank you for taking your time to answer your questions. So, my question is that one of the sectors that has been very immensely impacted is the aviation sector, because we know that there is a complete ban, a suspension of all air travel. So, how do you look into the aviation industry recovering from this crisis? And a follow-up question would be, how does India look forward to financing the fiscal economic stimulus packages, if any, in the future? Thank you.
So I have a bit of a paradoxical view when it comes to aviation, having been in the aviation sector myself for some time. I actually think once we get past the next few months and our airlines get back in operation, that India will actually do very well as far as the aviation sector is concerned. And the reason for that is we have a very large domestic market, and there will be much more of a desire to avoid hubs, actually fly directly to destinations. And I think what will happen is that people might change their fleets somewhat. Rather than looking only at narrow bodies, they'll look at wide bodies as well, long haul flights. And people will start to bypass hubs to the east, to the west of us, and start a lot of direct flights as well. And if you compare air travel with train travel, I'm sure you'll agree with me that in an age of pandemics, people will find it much better to travel in a plane for a shorter period of time than travel in a train for a long period of time. So even domestic travel, I think, is going to benefit greatly for airlines, because people will increasingly migrate away from trains and move to planes. And I think our aviation system is going to start to look a lot like the US system, where there aren't very many passenger long haul trains. There may be a few here and there, like Amtrak on the Eastern Corridor. But by and large, people fly everywhere. And the railway network is really a freight network. It's not a passenger network. We will still, of course, have large passenger volumes in India, but largely most AC and above travel will end up being something that we do on airplanes, because it's just so cost effective and so quick to be on an airplane. And so we'll see tremendous demand growth domestically, and increasingly as people move away from hubs, we will see a lot of international flights on our domestic carriers as well. So I think actually it's going to play out very well for our domestic airline industry. And I think, hopefully we will have all the digital technologies that we worked on, like DigiYatra and so on, being implemented quickly, so that your whole boarding process, your whole ticket issuance process and so on will be totally and thoroughly digitized, so that your customer experience as well going through airports and into planes is going to be very streamlined and very, very pleasurable. So with the necessary safeguards, masks, obviously gloves, etc., which will be quite freely available in airports and so on. I think once we get past the next few months, the next 6 months, let's say, of the pandemic, we'll find that airline travel will start to become really the preferred mode of transport. Now, secondly, you also asked about the fiscal deficit and how to finance the fiscal deficit. That, of course, the Ministry of Finance is working on, and I'm sure that they will come up with the best possible way of financing, the government borrowings going forward. They've just announced a large increase in government borrowings, and I'm sure they'll figure out the right way to do
that. Suresh, you had a question. Suresh,
hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Namaste, Jayant, and thank you for your time. I'm Suresh Venkatesh from Princeton University. I'm a postdoctoral research scholar. I really liked how you emphasized the importance of global health sector in this pandemic. But I feel that this pandemic has really exposed gaping loopholes in the healthcare systems of many developed and developing countries, including India. And India invests about 3.6% of its GDP in its healthcare, and about less than 1% in its science and technology expenditure. So do you think it's a time for India to really prioritize its expenditures and move away from heavy defense budget oriented budgets? Thank you.
Suresh, it's not either or. I think we can massively increase our expenditure on healthcare and on life sciences. I have already written about that. If you Google me, you'll find an article I wrote for the print recently where I've said that we need to substantially increase our expenditure on life sciences. I've also written multiple times about the need to really increase our spending on research and development and to build up an even stronger science and technology sector. Obviously, I speak as an engineer and a venture capitalist who's invested in a lot of science and technology startups as well. And the Times of India article that I wrote that got quite a lot of recognition and a lot of discussion started there was around this idea that science alone triumphs. And our national motto is Satyamev Jayate. And science is fundamentally about truth. What is science? Science is a way of, we'll never get to absolute truth, of course, but science is as good a way we know of getting to truth as anything else, right? Through developing a hypothesis, testing it, ensuring replicability, ensuring that it stands true, independent of where it's being. Empirical observations and our scientific findings are in fact robust in that regard. So the process of science, the manner in which we discover scientific truths, that is in fact our national approach, Satyamev Jayate. And so we need to really make sure that with that in mind, we support science and technology to the fullest extent possible, because it is science and technology that's gotten us from where we started as humanity, in savannas of East Africa to where we are today. It is only science and technology where we've continuously improved productivity, continuously become better problem solvers to get to where we are right now. And so we are excellent scientists and technologists and engineers and inventors as Indians. We demonstrated that both in India and around the world. And so I think it's very important that government and corporate sector really support science and technology and make us, a leading scientific player around the world.
So Jayanji, I read in your article, and we had a Facebook live with Shri Gadkari ji a couple of weeks ago, and the same question was raised that you have mentioned it very clearly that our research, especially in academia, is very underfunded. Given the fact of this economic crisis, do you think that moving forward, how do you see, especially with your members' private bill giving autonomy to IITs, where do we stand on that front? Because of course things will be prioritized and we will be focusing more on economic value projects. So how do you see the idea of funding research at a level we can do the similar kind of work we do in West?
No, I think there is a fair bit of support for strengthening our research base to put more into science and technology. And clearly, just the coronavirus pandemic is showing that it's very, very important for us to be a lot more capable, a lot more resilient, particularly when it comes to life sciences. We should have been able to develop our tests quickly. We should have been able to develop our drugs quickly. We should be able to develop our own vaccines. All of that is very much a part of our own self-reliance and our own self-sufficiency. And that can only come from outstanding science and outstanding scientists. And we have to support that and build that up. It's not done overnight. It takes decades to really build up a scientific capability and infrastructure where we are world leaders in multiple different areas, multiple different programs. So we really have to invest behind it. We have to work at it. And there's no reason why we won't be very, very successful at it.
Great. Anupam, you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, Jayant. So I am a PhD student at IIT Delhi. So I have a question for you that as per the recent media reports, that Indian agriculture sector has been badly hit. So what would be initiatives of the government towards reviving of Indian agriculture?
Kiran, that's a very, very comprehensive question. You're asking me to talk about all of agriculture, and it's very obviously difficult to do that. But I must first disagree with you. I think our agriculture sector is doing quite well. We've had, I think, a very good Rabi crop, and that crop is being harvested right now. So that harvest has done very well. Obviously, because of the coronavirus pandemic, there are challenges when it comes to sale of fruits, sale of flowers. Much of our sort of agricultural produce is being impacted because of that. But of course, as you know, over the last many years, we have been working very hard through the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Samman Nidhi, through the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sinchai Yojana, through Fasal Bima Yojana, through the Soil Health Card program to strengthen our agriculture sector and to provide the necessary support to our farmers. This time, one of the very important programs for our government is the Jal Jeevan Mission, so that we can get water into every field and provide water to our farmers as well, so that they can be able to use irrigation technology to grow even better, more productive crops.
Yes. So, hello, Jayant sir. This is Kiran Muthai from New York. I had an opportunity with you to interact with you when you were in Washington D.C. and Boston area when you were living in New York. So I work for one of the big four in New York City, and I also volunteer for Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, of which you were one of the founding director. So my question is again about reviving economy. Government has to support two different aspects: small and medium scale businesses, which are largely hit, but also people at the individual level. So is it a good idea for government to think about issuing government bond or sovereign bonds to generate more funding, which they can use for funding these small and medium scale businesses? And the individual level, my question is, as we are seeing the decrease in the oil prices, so how can we pass these benefits to the end user? Because still retail fuel prices are quite high and not scaled up to the global oil market.
So you've asked two questions, Kiran. One is about potentially a sovereign bond, and the other question is about fuel prices and excise and VAT relative to fuel prices. Let me answer the second one first. With respect to excise and VAT relative to fuel prices, obviously we know that fuel prices have roughly halved. But the government has done something very, very sensible, which is to increase VAT and to increase excise so that we can keep fuel prices roughly at where they were 65 rupees a litre, 75 rupees for diesel and so on, roughly in that range, depending on which region you're in. And the reason for doing that, obviously, is that we will be able to generate more revenues through these excise taxes and through VAT, which is required just now as we go into a growth slowdown on the one hand. And on the other hand, by keeping prices at those levels, 65, 70, 75, we continue to be able to deal with the climate change issues as well that are very serious and important for us. So by keeping the cost of fossil fuels reasonably high, we ensure that the appropriate substitution happens to other sort of decarbonization technologies so that we can progress as far as the climate change matters are concerned. So I think keeping fuel prices where they are is a very, very sensible and excellent move as far as the government is concerned. Now, coming to your question about the sovereign bond, I think that's really the Ministry of Finance's sort of area of responsibility to figure out what are the right financing approaches for them. I'm sure they're considering a variety of different methods and mechanisms to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Genji, I'm also seeing some Facebook Live comments, and there have been so many questions and comments on Facebook. So some people are repetitively asking about what are the government policy. Is this a good idea to give some waiver or relaxation on GSTs and regarding the taxation policy which government has?
Really, I think, Tushar, it's not appropriate for me to comment on any specific policy idea, specifically related to taxation. So let's refrain from those kinds of questions. General policy issues I'm happy to deal with, but specific questions on specific taxes, that wouldn't be appropriate to answer.
Sure. Thanks for being very straightforward on this. Next question we have from Omkar. Omkar, please unmute yourself. Omkar, are you online?
Yes, sorry. Uh, Thank you, Janji. This is Omkar Joshi from University of Maryland, College Park, and I'm doing PhD in sociology. So my question is pertaining to some of the groups, vulnerable sections, which do not have, which are not somehow covered under various programs that the government has launched. And migrant labor is one part of it, but there are other sections which are not covered under those programs. Let's say women, and there has been concerns about sort of some of the problems that they are facing because of the lockdown. So, what do you think should be the correct policy approach? Thank you.
So, Omkarji, as far as vulnerable sections are concerned, if you know about anyone who's suffering or in trouble because of any reason, please do let us know, because we have been consistently during the lockdown over the last 40, 45 days been addressing those issues. So, for instance, I have been able to get food, I've been able to get support in terms of housing, in terms of shelter, and even in terms of some cash to people in many, many different locations. Because right now our goal is to make sure that we support people wherever they are. And as and when we find out about people who are in need of support, we have addressed that through various different interventions, either through the state government there, through BJP Karyakartas, through interventions through local MPs and MLAs. So there are many ways in which we have been able to provide support to them. Now, if there are specific questions about women and others, please again, as I said, do let us know so that we can bring it to the Ministry, for example, of Women and Child Development, to Ministry of Social Justice, and so on, so that we can take appropriate action.
Great. One thing, Jayanji, which a lot of people, because have been watching a lot of Western news, and there have been recent interviews of Rahul Gandhi with Raghuram Rajan, as well as with the Nobel laureate. So the one narrative which is we are not able to understand and comprehend well is that the government is delaying the stimulus package. I mean, at some point of time, we will have to do it, and there are two school of thoughts in this. That one is saying that yeah, we should do it right away, like US has done and other countries have done. So, what are your views on the topic of stimulus package, and moving forward? Do you think it is a good idea to delay it so that we have more time to prepare, or government is looking into direction of releasing it soon?
So let me explain that matter to you in a very clear and simple way. I'll do my best to do that. First of all, I think it's wonderful that we have members of the opposition, we have economists of repute, we have thinkers, public intellectuals, thought leaders, all providing ideas and suggestions and their thoughts on what India should do. That's wonderful, and that's exactly how it should be in a democracy. Let the best ideas win. Let the best suggestions come forward. So I thank everyone who's providing suggestions. I acknowledge, and with a great and deep appreciation, everybody who's contributing ideas. All of you are contributing ideas. Shri Rahul Gandhi ji is contributing ideas. Various economists and thinkers are contributing ideas. However, I will say that this concern about a stimulus package is very misplaced. And the reason is because much of this has already happened. The Reserve Bank of India has already had three major policy announcements. They've been addressing problems as time have gone by. They have taken unprecedented steps in terms of cutting the repo rate, in terms of providing support for NBFCs, for mutual funds, for banks. So they've taken unprecedented steps. The government has already announced two major policy packages. One policy package was on the compliance issue and a variety of different technical requirements in terms of filings and compliance. That was addressed. Then there was a second package that was brought forward: 3 gas cylinders, money into Jan Dhan, Kisan Samman Yojana, and so on, which was intended to provide support to vulnerable sections of society. And of course, as we know, there are further announcements coming. I've already said that the approach has been to do it in a calibrated, sequenced way so that we understand where the issues are and then we address them directly and in a very targeted way. That the government has already been doing. So, Tushar, I will reject what you were saying. When is the stimulus coming? The stimulus has already happened. There have been multiple packages that have already been brought forward. The other thing I will say, which is always lost in these discussions, is people are ignoring what is being done by the states themselves. Each state is rolling out program after program. Each state is transferring money into the bank accounts of both, farmers as well as workers. States have done heroic work in terms of supporting their voters, their citizens. So you have to understand India as a federal economy. You have to understand India as cities doing a lot, states doing a lot, panchayats doing a lot, the central government doing a lot. And when you compare India to other countries, you have to take two things into account: this full federal structure and what is being done at all level of the federal structure. And number two, also the fact that when you quote in America or you quote a Germany or you quote in Italy, you have to understand that the impact of the pandemic there has been incredibly severe because, frankly, in some cases, they didn't get ahead of the curve like we've got ahead of the curve. So we've been very successful in pandemic management. We've attacked it, as I said, on all levels of government, and we've been rolling out policy package after policy package. So when you add it all up, which sadly very often people do not do, when you add it, very robust set of policy measures that have been undertaken to deal with the situation and the issues that we are confronting. And as I said, it's a sequenced, calibrated approach, and there is more to come. So all in all, I would say that you can see from the number of cases, the number of deaths, the hospitalization rates, as well as from economic growth forecasts like from the IMF and others, that when you compare India to other countries, no matter what the debates are, the reality is we are doing, relatively speaking, extraordinarily well.
So this is, I mean, this is amazing because one message, and people have been always asking this question, especially being in West, about, and the kind of clarity you have given us, I think a lot of people will be clear on this aspect because internationally what we hear and what we see is slightly different than the ground reality. And I think that serves the purpose for today's session. So we are going towards the end of the session. Maybe we will take another couple of questions. There are some messages I've been getting. There's a question from Mona Lisa Nanda. You can go ahead.
Sure, if it's all right, because we're coming close to 9 o'clock here. I'll take two more questions, two more final questions.
Sure. Mona Lisa, are you online? You can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, sir, I'm Monaisha Nanda. I'm a law student studying in Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law. My question for you is, how can the government reach beyond the ones who are connected to Kisan Gram Yojana, PM Garib Kalyan Yojana, as in these people do receive the benefits, but what about those such as the urban labor population who are not enrolled into these schemes and thus cannot reap the benefits of these, and they're suffering the worst times of their lives. So what can we do about them?
Mona Lisa, as I said earlier, also, it's very, very difficult and very, very heart-rending to actually see what is happening on the ground. It's a terrible, terrible situation for many, many people. The government is doing a tremendous amount to support them. And of course, the pandemic is not something that any one of us would want to have to deal with, but sadly, we are dealing with that. But if you look at the manner in which we are supporting, all the people who are suffering, you will see that, for example, through the Jan Dhan accounts, virtually everybody in India has a bank account. And those that have opened bank accounts through the Jan Dhan scheme are generally people who are the most vulnerable. So there is money going into every lady's Jan Dhan account. So we are the people that you don't think we are reaching through these schemes. Number one. Number two, if there are people, कोई बेचारे फ्लाईओवर के नीचे रह रहे हैं, तो कोई किसी दर्जी की दुकान में एक कमरे में 10 लोग फंसे हुए हैं, तो कोई लेबर कैंप में रह रहे हैं और हजारों लोग वहां हैं. बहुत जगहों में बहुत सारे लोग हैं. मुझे अच्छी तरह से मालूम है क्योंकि जैसे मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया कि मुझे 50,000 लोगों ने लिखा है और बताया उनकी क्या हालत, और मुझे व्हाट्सएप पे, मेरे फोन पे, मेरे ईमेल पे रोज हजारों लोगों के संदेश आ रहे हैं कि हम इस तरीके से फंसे हुए. तो जो हकीकत है, वास्तविकता है, जिस प्रकार से लोग आज के समय पीड़ित हैं, वो हम लोग अच्छी तरीके से समझ रहे हैं. लेकिन साथ साथ जो उनको अभी हम लोगों को समर्थन देना है, जो उन्हें सहयोग देना है, द सपोर्ट वी नीड टू प्रोवाइड देम in terms of food, in terms of some cash in their pockets, those we are providing them. The challenge now is for those people who want to leave where they are and get back home. How do we ensure that there's sufficient coordination from where they are in the states that they are in to the states they need to get to? And there, as I said earlier, as far as Jharkhand is concerned, I have to say very sadly that they're not getting the support that they should. And that is creating their anxiety, that is creating their frustration. We need to make it possible for people to be able to travel freely where they want to travel to, and at the same time deal with all the public health concerns around quarantining, around keeping them in an isolated situation for some period of time. These are the challenges we have. The challenges, Mona Lisa, and I will once again try and explain it very clearly. The challenges is not in situ. Many of you are scientists, you know the word in situ, right? In situ means where it is. Where they are, we are able to give them the support that they need. It's when they want to go from where they are back to their home state, that's where it becomes a lot more challenging, because the home state has to receive them and receive them safely. That is the real challenge that we're dealing with right now. And a lot of the stress and the anxiety that people are going through right now is in that reverse migration, in the trip back home, in the journey back home. That's where the anxiety stresses, not necessarily where they are.
And again, a lot of non-profit organization and social organization have been doing a lot of work to help and support people. We have been reading a lot of articles about the work RSS has been doing and other organization has been doing. So Jayanji, last question. Let's give a chance to a social science guy. There is a person from Tata Institute of Social Science, so I don't want to feel them isolated and engineering dominated audience. So Sudhakar, you have a question. Maybe this will be the last question, and please go ahead and ask your question.
Namaste, Jayant sir. So we have been seeing that a lot of states have been relaxing the labor laws and labor codes, saying that it will help boost the investment after the corona period. But then there have also been issues of laborers not getting their due, the informal economy hurting them, and the helping laws getting bypassed. So where is the balance in between this, like to relax or not to relax, to think pro labor or to think pro investment? Where is the balance in this?
Of course, there is going to be a balance, and we want to obviously make it very efficient for companies to be able to come and set up their plants and their factories and employ our people. But at the same time, of course, as far as labor is concerned, their rights have to be protected. They have to be given the support and the benefits that they deserve. So that balance has to be struck. And I can tell you, Sudhakar, that as far as government is concerned, as far as politicians are concerned, we are very, very sensitive and very focused on ensuring the rights of workers, because they are our voters. I mean, that's whom we are accountable to. So obviously that balance will be struck.
So with that, Jayanji, thank you so much for your time. I think we have a lot of clarity on different topics. And as Jayanji mentioned, wherever we are, whichever part of the world, we should try to do best possible efforts to help our country and be united and fight against this pandemic. So Jayanji, with this, if you have any closing remarks, feel free to have them. And with this, we will close our session for today.
Well, I'll just conclude, friends, by first of all, once again, thanking Tushar and his whole team for making this interaction possible. Thank you for your very excellent questions, very probing and insightful questions. You've hit on all the key issues. And I will just finish up by saying that this is, in fact, a very excellent set of opportunities for India. And in large measure, that is because of all of you, because of your talent, your determination, your energies, your hard work. That's what makes India a great country. It's because of what you all do. Keep doing it. Keep supporting us. We are here to serve you, here to work for you, and we're here to help you in whatever way we can. Thank you very, very much. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir.
Jai Hind.
Sir.